Gracious Father, we thank you for this beautiful morning, and what it is just a joy to be in your house and be under your word and to be led by your spirit as we look into this lesson today. We just ask that you bless this time as we delve into Daniel 11, just the tail end of one king and the rise of another, and yet there's so much intrigue. So God, we just ask that you just open our eyes as to what your scripture has to say, and we just ask for your blessings. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So today, when we get into the chapter or the portion of chapter 11 on Antiochus IV, he's the one that rises really to the main character of a big portion of this chapter. And the reason why is his impact to the Jews. We have to think Jewish all the time as to what is the focus of God's word for the book of Daniel, and it's mainly is for the Jews. All right. So to give you a kind of a overview of this portion of chapter 11, what's in blue we've covered. We've gone through a lot of from the time of the Persian Empire all the way to Antiochus III last Sunday. And so we've gone through quite a bit of that, and I put in red verse 20 because we only finished up to verse 19 last week, and that is not the final end of Antiochus III. There's a little bit more there, so I want to really go through that. Very important verse. And then the next section, verses 21 to 35, talks about Antiochus IV. And just verse 21, as we'll find out, his rise to power, there are just so many twists and turns, but the Bible is very concise in what it says, almost very just abbreviated in what it's saying. So we'll get into that. And as we do, at first I was hoping to get through verse 28 today, but there's no way. I think I will end up getting just to verse 21 actually, because there's a lot of background as to what's going on, and some of the key people that will be in this lesson is on the board. Antiochus III being the king that eventually died, mentioned in verse 19. And then he has two sons. Seleucus IV is the oldest, and then Antiochus IV is the younger. And then Seleucus IV has two sons, Demetrius, and another son also named Antiochus. And then there's this character named Heliodorus, which we'll learn a lot more about today. Just a quick recap in this block of verses 17 to 20 about the dismal end of Antiochus III. So in verse 17, he arranges a peace with Egypt because he really wants to expand to get to Egypt. So he has all this territory, but he still wants to go down to Egypt. And how he does it, he tries to devise a way of, well, if I give my daughter Cleopatra I to marry Ptolemy V, then I can maybe have her influence his thinking. He's a very young man at the time, so that they would disassociate with Rome, and then he would be able to win over that. But instead, Cleopatra I, she's actually very loyal to her husband. So she starts strengthening the relationship with Rome, Egypt and Rome, and not really listen to what the father wanted. So that's what's going on there. And keep this in mind. Maybe I'll give you give you an email in the next couple of weeks where this actually plays a role in the kings of Egypt down the line. It's very interesting. This marriage, so-called arrangement peace treaty, actually has an impact generations later. Okay, I didn't realize that till this week. Oh, wow, there's a lot of stuff here. So he tried to do that. It didn't work. So what did he do? he turned his attention to Thrace and the Greek territory. So here is where he is. Here's Judea. He went to Egypt. It didn't work. So now he's going this way. And he's going northwestward. And he runs into the Romans, which is starting to expand from west to east. So he runs into Scipio, one of the generals there, and Scipio defeats him badly. And he beat him in Thermopylae in 191, and then 2 years later in Magnesia. So all these wars in about 2 to 3 years have a huge impact on really even the cost of the Roman Empire. So because of that, Scipio lays down the reparations that Antiochus III has to pay. You caused us all this war, you caused us all this expenses, and now, as a part of so-called calling it peace, the end of the Roman Seleucid War, you're going to have to do all these things. And this is the Treaty of Appia. Okay? So this is where the Bible uses very interesting language. A commander, that's Scipio, puts an end to the taunting of Antiochus III. Instead, Scipio turns the taunting against him. So what Scipio do is like, you try to taunt us with all this, well really, now you're gonna have to pay for all the things that you try to cause. So this is where the Treaty of Appia is. And as I mentioned, it's an extremely humiliating treaty for them. And these are some of the terms and conditions, and I just mentioned a couple that he has to give up so much of his weaponry, the war elephants, the warships, and so forth. And one key thing that lingers on for the next generation is he has to give up 20 hostages, and one of them is his son. So that's why Antiochus IV was given to the Romans and put into a Roman jail in Rome. So that's where he is. In some way, Rome did not ask for his oldest son, but did ask for his second son. Okay, perhaps to maintain some kind of line of succession in case Antiochus III dies. So Antiochus IV goes to jail, and I mentioned that the penalty, the cost of the war, is so huge. We're talking 1,000 talents a year. It's like 70,000 pounds of silver every year. So how do you get that much silver? Okay, so here, not much Scipio, those terms, not much Antiochus III can do. So he accepted all the terms. And he paid the down, which is 3,000 talents, I think, furnished the 20 hostages, which included Antiochus IV. So this really not only he had to do that, but it really weakened the Seleucid Empire. Big time. And he had to retreat back, lost territory, lost a lot of money. He lost his son for a while, and so it's a really humiliating defeat. Okay? So, verse 19, it says that that's Antiochus III, went back to his own land. So he had to retreat back from where Thrace is and the Greek territories, had to go back. So he's now reduced to a smaller territory. It's still quite large, but he just went too far. He overextended. And he would try to raise money to pay off all these war debts. So when he paid the war debts, he heard that there was this temple that had a bunch of silver and gold. So he goes over there, raids it, and then the people are upset. Then why are you raiding our city temple? And he gets killed. So this war cost him his life, basically. So the Seleucid monarch, Antiochus III, he's killed near Susa. And then, because he's killed, Seleucus IV becomes king. So Antiochus III dies there. And the next several slides, I'm just going to run it right through, but you can read on your own. I did a quick biography of him, of Antiochus the third, because he actually did a lot of things. He reigned for, I would say, 40 something years, close to 40 years. And so there's his full name. When he was born, he became king at age 18. So back in that day, you're very young and you could become king, and you had a lot of responsibilities. And so he reigned at age 18. He inherited a very disorganized state. So he actually did a lot of things to shore up the empire, okay, and restore much of the territory of the empire. Okay. This is the part about where he tried to extend to against the Romans, and he was rebuffed. And it's interesting that not many people wanted to follow him. So usually when you go into war, other territories' leaders, you try to gain their alliance. So you would team up to go, and he just didn't have very many. So the Romans cut him off, outflanked him, and just beat him.
Peter, that Philip of Macedon must be a different later one than the father of Alexander the Great, right?
Yeah, this is Philip V. Yeah, that's Philip V. You're right. The kings love to reuse their names. Yeah. So here, Antiochus, he had to. This is more details of the loss of battle, the Treaty of Appia. So here, this is where his kingdom's reduced to Syria, Mesopotamia, and Western Iran. So it's shrunk. So he extended too far north and west. He didn't win Egypt in the south, so he's confined a bit. And this is how he dies. So here's a kind of a picture of where we're at now. So Lucas IV is king, right? This is in 187. And his two sons. And turns out this Antiochus is very young. Okay. And Antiochus IV is in jail. He's all the way in Rome. So this is the kind of the lay of the land right now. All right. Okay. I need to change my animations. Anyway. Verse 20. It says, in his place, that's Antiochus III, one will arise, the next king, that's Seleucus IV, okay? Who will send out a tax collector. This tax collector turns out to be Heliodorus for the glory of the kingdom. But within a few days, he will be broken, though not in anger or in battle. Okay, so we're gonna try to tackle the first half of this verse. Some translations for the glory of the kingdom, it says through the jewel of his kingdom. That's other translations. Basically, what that is saying is Seleucus IV is sending out a tax collector through Jerusalem. Jewel of the kingdom is jewel in God's eyes. So this is where a lot of treasures are in Jerusalem. And Seleucus IV goes, well, I need money. I need treasures. So I'm going to send somebody. And this is his, this is his finance minister, actually, to take an army, take a bunch of guys with you, go to Jerusalem and try to raid the temple. Because I need that to pay off Rome. Okay. So Seleucus IV actually had a large kingdom, and but he was strapped with a heavy war indemnity exacted by Rome. So his father left him with a huge debt that he had to somehow fulfill. Okay, and he raised a lot of taxes, very heavy. So he was really unpopular with his people. So here we are, 187. So by the time it gets to 178, so it's like 9 years later, he sends this tax collector or tribute collector, Heliodorus, to go through and try to round up more treasures. So here, Seleucus IV is paying off the 1,000 talents a year for the first 8 to 9 years, but he basically kind of runs out and he needs to get more. Okay. So here's a historian's account. So Seleucus IV becomes king, and this event about sending a tax collector to go to the jewel of the kingdom is so kind of cryptic and just a phrase. So people say, well, what does this mean? And the historian account says that this alludes to an episode narrated more fully in Second Maccabees. We have to go to Second Maccabees to get a better understanding of what this event is. So according to this historian, Simon's a jealous rival of the high priest Ananias. So Simon reports to some Seleucid officials that, hey, Jerusalem temple has a lot of treasure. Go send somebody and get it. Okay. So Simon is trying to get his way in to be the high priest. So he says this. It may be true, it may not be true, but he's trying to jockey his position for high priest. And we'll find out later that the high priest is a very sought after position where people actually pay to be the high priest instead of going in the line of the Levites and how it should be. And this is in the later verses. So according to Second Maccabee, Seleucus sends his chief minister, Heliodorus, to confiscate these funds, but he was foiled, he was stopped. And we'll look into that in a minute. And according to Second Maccabees, which is why this is kind of in legendary form, their temple was defended by some angelic figures who beat Heliodorus senseless. Okay, that's what Second Maccabees records. So if we wonder, well, is it really true? But there's not really much other sources at the time that we could rely on to talk about this event. So here we got a very short phrase in the Bible, but with very little other sources to expand on it. We got some historians that talk a little bit about it, but not the legendary form of how it went. So this went on for many, many centuries, actually, that nothing was really found to add to this information. Okay. So here's passages in 2 Maccabees chapter 3 that talks about these events. So take it with a bit of a grain of salt as to what it is, but a lot of the names are true, I think. So Ananias, he's the high priest in Jerusalem, and he was actually quite loyal. And they try to collect taxes. And then Simon, from the tribe of Benjamin, he lost an argument with Ananias. So this is where there's a battle going on as to who should be high priest, and he's trying to vie for that position. Okay. So Simon said that there's a lot of money in the temple treasury, so much money it could not be counted. Okay. So since the money was not needed for sacrifices, maybe we can put it under the king's control. Maybe you, king, can take this because they got way access, right? So that's what's going on here. So Heliodorus is the person, the chief minister, that's assigned to grab all these treasures. So this is a picture from a painting of him. So, and how it's written is that he sets out at once to do his mission, and he claimed that he's only making a tour to inspect the cities. I'm just inspecting. You guys got everything in order, but not really taking anything. Just that's his story. And so, at the very moment him and his bodyguards arrive at the treasury, the Lord of all supernatural powers caused such a vision to appear that everyone who had dared to enter with Heliodorus was panic-stricken and weak with fear at the display of the Lord's power. So this is where some things that we don't know how accurate that might be. Okay.
Is that a picture of a money pot that he's spending?
Yeah, so this is the money that the treasury that he's like stealing, and then he's being hit with this these figures and the spills on the ground. And this is actually a picture of a painting, which I'll show in a minute. So here's the last passage on from 2 Maccabees 3. So what adds to this, there's a vision where they saw a horse and a rider. So many people saw a horse and a rider, and this horse is fully very decorated, and the horse rushes at Heliodorus and strikes him with his hoofs. Two strong and handsome young men wearing fine clothes were beating him unmercifully. So this is kind of, we don't know how much folklore is this. He falls unconscious and all that. They carry him out. So at the end, they all openly acknowledge the mighty power of God. So this is the account from 2 Maccabees chapter 3. And 2 Maccabees was probably written around probably 100 BC or turn of the century, quite a long time ago. But here's some paintings depicting these events. Now these artists painted this in 1674, 1724. So here, we're talking 1700 years later, they're still clinging on to this writing from 2 Maccabees, right? So, so the picture on the far left is a horse with two men striking Heliodorus that's on the ground. This is the bodyguards at the treasury getting a whole container full of treasures. And here's two men beating Heliodorus. So this has gone on for a long time. And in fact, the famous artist Raphael painted this, where this is Heliodorus, this is the money being spilled, this is the horse with the hoof striking him, here are the two men that is going to get him. So this is, and Onias, the high priest, is at the altar in the middle. So this is a kind of a beautiful painting, but this is, you know, they're trying to draw this event, right? Paint this event. So here's a description of it. Heliodorus lying down. He's sent by the king to steal treasure from the Jewish temple. The high priest is praying for the intervention, for the prevention of this disaster over there in the middle. Okay. So yeah, so this reliance on the 2 Maccabees 3 has gone on for many centuries, right? And then we find this interesting artifact called the Heliodorus stele. So this is a find that was very recent, less than 100 years ago. So this finally put in some collaboration to the Bible, but a little bit less on the exaggeration, I would say, of 2 Maccabees. Okay. So this Heliodorus stele is of 178 BC, and it sheds light on this account. So this was a very interesting find, and this is an excerpt from the Israel Museum about this artifact. So here's the artifact, and they decipher this, and it does say that Heliodorus did receive orders to seize the treasures from the temple in Jerusalem. Okay, and driven out by fearsome horsemen, two mighty youths. And so here's still kind of grainy, but this is the actual inscription and of this. And so here's an excerpt from the Israel Museum about this artifact. This stele documents a correspondence between Heliodorus and King Seleucus IV. So this collaborates this discussion that they're doing. And in this letter written on the stele, he announces the appointment of an administrator, which is Heliodorus, to oversee all the sanctuaries in the province. So it gives him his tasks, and he's supposed to oversee all the sanctuaries, including the temple in Jerusalem. So this is where he gives Heliodorus his high position. And it says includes authority over the sanctuary's revenues, taxes due to the king. And so this is kind of their storyline as to this is the assignment I'm going to give you, so you can go get these treasures, really. And here's what the writings itself on the steel is. This is in the blue bullet. This is the actual writing is here. Okay. Right. Taking the utmost consideration for the safety of our subjects. Okay. That's their storyline. Thinking we the greatest good for the affairs of our realm, when those living in our kingdom manage their lives without fear, and so forth. So they just kind of just give reasons as to take good care that's befitting to them. So basically, they're just using this task of exercising really close control to get this. Okay, and so this is where at least we found an artifact that is close to, that matches with what the second Maccabee says in kind of the basic facts, but also collaborates with Daniel 11, verse 20. All right. So I'm gonna spare me a few minutes to go through some archaeology. I kind of like it. I don't know. So here's a discovery. So I was able to find this source. So this Ian Stern wrote a final report on the excavations of this Mauritia Subterranean Complex 57, also named as the Heliodorus Cave. So this person, with contributions from all these other archaeologists, actually wrote this report in 2014 about the findings. Okay, this is how recent this is. So it's a really long report. I'm not going to bore you with it. It's 140 pages. But the very last chapter has Heliodorus in it. So this is the title of chapter 12, the last chapter. And this city, Mauritia, is very close to Hebron and also Jerusalem there. So this is where they had this archaeological find. Okay, they started digging this around 1900, 1898 to 1900. And this complex has 4 major rooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's like a staircase. Here's the elevation of it. So it's actually not that big, but it's like, how do you find something that's in the middle of like nowhere and then to find this? So here's some pictures of the rooms. So this is where archaeologists work to try to find some of these pieces. So basically, too long, don't read. So I just took some excerpts. So this is just the introductory first couple pages of this report. So the excavations, 1980s, determined that all the things they're digging up is from the Hellenistic period. So it's about the right period of all these things. And then in the year 2000 to 2010, Israel Antiquities Authority, IAA, conducted this excavation. They found some major things in room 1, and one of them is fragments of stones that is part of the Heliodorus stele that is in the museum. Okay, so they were able to find it, and these stone fragments was found in 2005 and 6. That's how recent this is of finding these stones. Oh, so last bullet. The 3 inscribed stone fragments that were found, right? The stones were identified to be part of the Heliodorus stele, which had been previously recovered from the antiquities market. Somebody stole that whole long thing, sold it in a market, and then they bought it, and Israel Museum bought it. Now they found these pieces that matches that. So somebody was able to, that's a big stone, right? How did they get it out of there? But that's what happened. So here, based on, they examined these 3 pieces to make sure it was authentic. And one of them is they look at the soil samples that's engraved in the letters to see the soil sample matches. Very interesting. So apparently the stele that originated in this complex 57 was stolen during a robbery at the site. So that's what happened. They robbed this, and the 3 fragments discovered actually does meet up. And so here are the 3 fragments, right? Like that, 1, 2, and 3. They actually match up to the big piece that was stolen and given to the Israel Museum. Okay. Okay, so yeah, this is just talks about how important this finding was. And so here they found identical text of a stone discovered in their warehouse. There's so many pieces, like how do you keep track of your database of pieces? And they did find one in the warehouse that was discovered before in 1954. Got turned over to the authorities, and then they got rediscovered in 2013. So just to point out, this is a tough business to to try to understand all this and decipher things. All right. Okay, end of the report. Okay, so now we know that this Seleucus IV sent out this tax collector, and it says, but within a few days he will be broken. So Seleucus IV will be broken or will die, but not through anger or in a battle. So what's going on here is verse 20, one verse talks about the whole reign of Seleucus IV. That's it. Right before Antiochus III dies, in verse 19, verse 20, Seleucus IV, his whole reign, and he dies. Starting in verse 21 is the next king. So just one verse dedicated to him. So that's why when it's so compact, it's kind of hard to figure out, well, what happened in those 12 years of reign, right? So within a few days, Seleucus IV reigns for about 11 years, which is short compared to the reign of Antiochus III, the previous king. So that's why the translation, the verse says within a few days is translated like that. It could also mean that Heliodorus was sent in 178, but Seleucus IV died just 3 years later. So that could also mean within a few days. It's hard to figure out what that Hebrew word means. It turns out that phrase, within a few days, is the only time used in the Bible. So it's hard to get a reference on that. And with eschatology, it's very undeterminate sometimes as to the time frame of things. So within a few days, you could look at it as from Seleucus IV's reign, or just how short it was from the order he sent to when he actually died. And then he died, he was assassinated, he was poisoned, actually by Heliodorus. Okay, and upon his trip returning, collecting revenue. Heliodorus, so after he poisons Seleucus IV, he wants to seize the throne for himself, but he's not in the royal line. So what does he do? He tries to be the so-called advisor to the younger son, Antiochus, right? So Seleucus had a younger son, Antiochus. He tries to be his so-called mentor, coach, or whatever, and he's actually ruling the kingdom. Why he's ruling the kingdom is because Demetrius the First is not there, and we'll find out that he's actually in prison. We'll find that out in a minute. But that's just kind of a summary of, well, he's trying to do that. And we'll find out somehow Antiochus IV outmaneuvered him. I'm going to give you a final, kind of conclusion there, but there's a lot of details that goes before that. Okay. All right. So I want to kind of wrap up because we finished a whole section leading up to Antiochus IV. I want to give some comments that I found very helpful about the theology of all this leading up to that. And basically, it says here that we looked at it, Daniel 8 talks about how the Alexander the Great Empire got divided and so forth, right? And Daniel 8:9 says that rather small horn would come out of these. Okay, the fulfillment is Antiochus IV. But in the third bullet here, what we learned from chapter 8 is, well, we got Alexander the Great's empire divided, then we leap all the way to Antiochus IV. But there's this gap of more than 100 years back in chapter 8. So what is chapter 11 doing? Is filling in that gap. That's how you kind of chronologically piece together the book of Daniel. So that's why I put it in blue, that the historical material in chapter 11 verses 5 to 20 provides the details of this gap between the two reigns. Okay, the four generals of Alexander and Antiochus IV. Okay, there's that big gap, basically 280 BC to 175. So here, this shows the purpose of this passage really is to show Antiochus' fourth reign is a struggle between Egypt and Syria, kings of the north, kings of the south. And the struggle, Judah was really significantly affected because they're right in the middle. So that's why the book of Daniel focuses on Judah, and it's these two nations that keep on battling each other, but keep on running over Judah back and forth, depending on who won. So Judah is a prize that each desperately sought, because that was like kind of the gateway from north to south. So you got north, Judah, and south, but all here is desert. So you can't go around this way. You have to go through Judah. So that's why it's such a desperately sought after piece of land. So this underscores the crucial role that the promised land plays in world history, even today, right? That strip of land, Israel, is so important. You think, wow, the size of like New Jersey, why is it so important to the world? Okay, this is just underscores that it's been going on for centuries, for millennia, right? All right. So we're going to get into the section on Antiochus IV's reign, and he rises in power. So I want to give this commentary by Dr. Walvoord about this, because it helps us to frame what is God thinking when God is writing this passage, verses 21 to 35. Dr. Walvoord's a very famous theologian, not only of the end times, but also Daniel and other books. So he's probably written maybe over 100 books, and he's quite an expert in the end times. So it says that beginning verse 21, which we're going to delve into, the major section of this chapter is devoted to a comparatively obscure Syrian ruler. It really is true. It's just a small piece of land. He only rules for 11 years, but somehow he's so prominent in this book. He's the little horn that's in Daniel 8. Only his death in 164 prevented him being humiliated by Rome. We'll find that out in future lessons. Okay. And the reason why it's so prominent talking about Antiochus IV is because he's the one that desecrated the Jewish temple. He's the one, and he's the one that did such bitter persecution of the Jewish people. So it's all about the Jews and how anybody is really going either for or against the Jews. That's the focus of the book of Daniel there. And so he's a vile person. And the last bullet I think is really key is that his decision here, when you read verse 21, that's God's viewpoint of him, of Antiochus IV. God's viewpoint of him is that he has such an immoral life, persecution, his hatred for the people of God. And you see that over and over again, characterized by intrigue, expediency, and his lust for power, which his father had too. Antiochus III had lust for power, wanted to go down to Egypt and go to Rome, right? and honor is always secondary to him. So here, this section, it says, in his place, a despised person will arise. So this despised person is Antiochus IV. Royal honors will not be given to him. Okay, we'll look into what that means. But he will come during a time of peace and seize the kingdom by intrigue. And it goes on about how he acts deceitfully and so forth. So here, think back when we studied chapter 8, where this Antiochus IV was like peace and safety, and he comes in time of peace, and he comes by intrigue, meaning that is actually, intrigue is a negative word. If you look it up as a noun, that it's by very deceptive means that he is gaining something. Okay, and so here, just verse 21 as an intro to this whole section describes Antiochus IV as that kind of despised person. Okay, that's the lead-in to this passage, this section for him. Okay, and here's the verse 21, where in some of the translations, instead of despised person, you might have contemptible person, a vile person. So those are some other translations of it. Now, royal honors, other translations say honor or royalty. So it's not just like you have really high honors, it's honor of like royalty meaning king. One translation says majesty of kingship. So the majesty of kingship will not be given to him. This is not, he doesn't have the right to have the majesty of kingship. Okay? It says royal honor has not been rightfully conferred. That's another translation. So here, this Antiochus IV is very despicable, contemptible, and he will not be given the kingship, but somehow he will come during a time of peace and he will seize the kingdom by some intrigue. What other translations say flatteries, treachery, deception. So this one verse really kind of sums up not only Antiochus IV from God's viewpoint of his personality, but also what happened. How did he become king? Okay, and then how did he do it? Okay, so I like this commentary where it says this serves to introduce and characterize Antiochus IV as lacking honor, lacking legitimacy. He's not legitimate. He shouldn't have been king. Okay, so he's not the heir to the throne because the younger brother of Seleucus IV, Demetrius, should be king. Okay, that's why I wrote that on that. So Seleucus IV, when he died, the next person in line is Demetrius I, his oldest son, not his brother, Antiochus. That's how the royal lines work. Okay. So here's kind of the backstory. So Antiochus IV, we remember he forced his son, Antiochus IV, to be a prisoner in Rome. That's from that treaty, right? He was sent him as one of the 20 hostages, right? And then afterwards, Antiochus the Great, or the third, dies. So Seleucus IV is king, okay? And he has two sons, Demetrius and a son named Antiochus. So that's what's going on. And this is an very kind move is an understatement. What did he do? He gave his oldest son Demetrius as a hostage exchange for his brother. Can you imagine that? So Seleucus IV sends his oldest son to Rome to go to jail so that he can bring his brother back. Wow. It's like, that is, it's like, we don't know why he did that, but he brought his brother back and did a prisoner exchange. Okay? All right. So, Antiochus IV, Antiochus IV is coming out of jail, right? And I put Athens here because he stops by Athens. And there'll be more on that maybe next time. So on his way home, Antiochus IV stops in Athens. And actually, he meets with quite a number of people, some higher ups within the Roman council and so forth. So when he arrived in Athens, he learns that Seleucus IV was assassinated. Remember Heliodorus poisoned him? So when Antiochus IV is in Athens, he finds out Seleucus IV is killed, is assassinated as a result of that minister Heliodorus, right? So at that time that Seleucus V died, his younger son Antiochus is only 5. Okay. So who's king now, right? Seleucus IV is dead. His oldest son is in the Roman jail, which means Antiochus is king. And Antiochus is king at age 5, but he's a puppet king because Heliodorus is the one that's in power. Okay, so it's like, meanwhile, Antiochus IV is in Athens, so he's not king, right? So this is Heliodorus' scheme. So he tries to get some kind of semblance of legitimacy and continuity. So he probably presents it to the people that the death of the king, Seleucus IV, was due to natural causes. Kind of cover his tracks. So now Heliodorus manages the affair of the state. He's really kind of the king, even though Antiochus is a puppet king. Okay, so that's what's going on so far. So as you think about this, this royal line of succession, this is why he's not given the honor. So here's the royal line of succession for the UK. So I figured, this is pretty relevant here. So we got King Charles III. His son, Prince William, is the heir to the king. And next in line is his oldest son, Prince George, right? And then it's Prince George, Charlotte, and Louis is higher in line than Prince Harry, right? So here we are. It's like, okay, well, that means that's why Demetrius and Antiochus should be king and not Antiochus IV, because he's the son of the second oldest son of Antiochus III. So here, the royal line of succession is through what's in red, okay? So now, we get this intrigue of, well, how does Antiochus end up getting to be king, okay? So we have the battle for kingship of the Seleucid Empire right now. So Seleucus IV is assassinated, Heliodorus is vying for power, Demetrius I is in jail, and Antiochus is very young. This is what's going on, okay? I'm gonna stop it here because there's a lot of backstory with all this. Part of actually very difficult is Antiochus being very young. There's very little on this until they found some coins actually, okay? So there's some coins that show, well, these are the coins of Seleucus IV. This is the coins of Antiochus IV, but there's coins of Antiochus that's in the middle in terms of the dating. So we know that he's actually real in history, okay? So, so this is where I'm going to stop it here because I want to get the flow of the rest of of this portion of the intrigue of Antiochus IV. Okay. Any questions or thoughts? Is this too much history, archaeology? No. Okay. Because I was looking at this, it's like, wow, there's still a lot more details as to what's going on because a lot of this confirmation of, did these things really happen? You know, finding these things out. And some of the archaeological finds are just so recent. Like 2013, they confirmed this, right? So this is where there's so much doubt.